Anda dalam kecemasan? Perlukan bantuan segera daripada polis, bomba, hospital, pertahanan awam atau maritim. Hubungi kami melalui aplikasi mudah Save Me 999. Aplikasi ini dapat membantu orang kurang upaya yang menghadapi masalah pendengaran dan pertuturan, meliputi seluruh negara. Muat turun secara percuma di telefon bimbit pintar anda. Pilih jenis kecemasan. Masukkan data tambahan jika perlu. Lokasi anda akan terpapar di skrin. Klik hantar. Maklumat kecemasan dihantar ke Pusat Panggilan Kecemasan MERS 999. Bantuan akan dihantar dengan secepat mungkin. Save Me 999.
Ada terletak di ujung kampung, bawah cermin kopak ada kota, tersembunyi dalamnya ada tempurung, sembunyi bawahnya kata melala.
Atur 10 daktil, batal yang batil, detik 2 usul ditutup, satu lagi tampil. Dari halaman rusuk kiri, satu susuk ganjil, minta diisolasi dari dalil busuk jahil. Aspirasi tak serasi dengan suara bunyi, ingkar serasi dari penghuni dan keluarga bumi. Surat wasiatnya atas paksi dalam rumi, minta dikebumikan hidup-hidup dalam kuni. Mana cepat terbang atau warna gelang tangan, buah pikiran aneh tergantung di persimpangan. Halusinasi susul di ketandusan ihsan.
Hi everyone, welcome to Insight. Here on the show, we like to share success stories, experiences, challenges on what it takes for personal growth and development, and of course paving the way for more success stories. And here on the show, we are more than honoured to be talking to Mr. Darren Choy, the Managing Director of Warner Music Malaysia and Singapore.
That's correct.
So how does that work, Malaysia and Singapore?
How does work? I guess Malaysia, obviously, I say Singapore is actually a relatively small market for us, and I guess because it's a relatively small market itself, it doesn't really justify having a full-fledged MD in Singapore. So therefore, unfortunately, I had the unfortunate responsibility to take over the running of Singapore. Besides Malaysia itself.
Now, before we move on to business, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
You're most welcome.
A lot of people would like to know if you can describe Darren Choy in 5 words.
Okay, do you want me to describe it from a personal standpoint or is it a professional standpoint now?
Professional standpoint.
Professional, okay. Well, I'm extremely competitive. Now, extremely competitive is only 2 words, unfortunately, right? So, okay, and I'm very competitive. I'm very passionate about what I do, and I would say, I'm also extremely loving in terms of the work itself and from a personal aspect itself, and I would say aggressive, simply because I think in any business world, anything that you do, you've got to have that particular element for you to actually be ahead. And I guess one other word is I would say fun. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting dynamics,
play, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy.
Exactly. So, yes, that's right.
Let's retract back. To where to what brings you here today. What was growing up like?
Well, I mean, I guess growing up was like, obviously my family was, I would say a middle class family, and I guess, there were, the bare basics that I actually had. And I think it was interesting because, obviously, I don't come from a well-to-do family, so whatever I had was the bare basics. And I think it's an amazing journey for me because, growing up in an environment whereby I only had like one pair of football boots and one pair of what they call spikes because I was very active in running, and a couple of pairs of school shoes, and that was it, right? And I always remember the fact that I always cherish my pair of football boots and my pair of running spikes, for I think probably 5 years. And thank God my feet never actually grew after that because it stayed at size 8.5 or 8, 9,
Wow.
right? So, so I think, growing up in that sense was, of course, a loving family. I've got one younger brother, and both of us are also athletes, and we're very active in school and things like that. So, I would say growing up is also very much, in terms of school, I guess, I've been relatively popular in school because I was in athletics, I was, a state volleyball player and things like that, right? So to me, I think I spent a lot of time, growing up playing sports, literally.
Yeah, the jocks were always the popular ones anyway.
Well, unfortunately, I went to boys' school, so. So,
okay, didn't know that.
Yeah, so, but I guess the other things I always remember when I was growing up, let's say from standard 1 all the way to form 5, I've always been the class monitor. Except for 1 year, which was, again, I think it has actually scarred me because I think when I was in standard 4, I was actually an assistant monitor, which I was quite devastated, right?
Burn.
So, yeah, I know. And I was like, okay, you know what? This is where maybe that's where the competitiveness comes in, right? To say, you know what, I really want to be at the top of the class. I want to be the monitor of the class and things like that.
Yeah, but you see, you have this sense of leadership since you were a kid.
Yeah.
You went to the States to get your degree.
Yes, I did.
And then you started with EMI.
Yes, I started with EMI. Actually, I not really EMI because my first job was actually in real estate, which nobody knew, right? Because it was such a short stint that what happened was I said I came back. I said, you know what did I do? Just get a job, right? And my dad was like, okay, let's just get a job. So I ended up going into real estate, and I was literally selling properties, renting out properties and stuff. Then I looked at it and said, you know what? I probably don't want to actually look at 4 walls all throughout my life, right? So that was where the slight, or I would say the career change happened, right? It was probably out of luck, or is it out of whatever, and it actually happened. So through 9 months in real estate, I was like, okay, I'm done. Let me go into something else, right?
The what's next?
Yes,
yes. Now, when KRU,
yes,
our most renowned band ever in Malaysia, they mentioned you were the one who believed in them and who forwarded a football demo rap song or something. So you've done a lot in helping a lot of our aspiring singers achieve their dreams. So how does that sit with you?
Well, I would say that I guess for me, music has always been part of my life, in the sense that I've always enjoyed music, ever since I was young. Funny enough, I'm not musically inclined. I don't play instruments, right? But at least I'm not tone deaf, thank God. So for me, it's like music has always been, as I said, part of my life, and therefore, for me, it's like, well, it's also being able to actually identify what's a potential hit song, what's not. Now, it sounds very scientific. It's like, oh, you know what? I think this is a hit song. This is not. But in reality, sometimes it's difficult. As music executives, we are experienced because we've heard a lot of songs. We see how productions are and stuff like that. So, but in that aspect itself, sometimes it's also a matter of luck. Sometimes it's the whole packaging. So I would say that let's say talking about artists itself. A lot has to do with the total package of an artist, and the marketing, the promotions, and every aspect that comes with it. So it's not really, you can't just say, well, just because the person can sing, therefore he can be successful. The person is beautiful, therefore the person can be successful or popular. No, it's a combination of everything, really. So
and a bit of luck.
A little bit of luck, yes. Well, luck is again something that we don't know exactly what luck means, but it is luck.
Now venturing into the music industry, people see the red carpet, people see the award nights, the CD sales, the platinum sales, but What's the most common misconception? What people don't know about, being in this line of work? Take us through your typical day.
Okay, I guess, Mike, there isn't a typical day, funny enough, right? I mean, there isn't a typical day simply because, okay, there may be some basic stuff that I need to do. Of course, I come into the office, I got to go through my emails and stuff like that, but even the content of the emails are very different because there's no such thing as, every day I'm going to get 5 emails from my staff. No, because I'm going to get 16, I'm going to get 800 or whatever it may be. I would say, time that I would spend, on a typical day or typical week or typical month would be, I meet, obviously I have to meet my artists, but of course I don't meet them all the time. I meet business partners. It could be, and I do interviews like this, and of course, I also basically liaise with my regional office in Hong Kong, I liaise with New York, and things like that. So I would say there are lots of those things. Then, we look at, basically working with partners in terms of, having alliances. I look at basically doing endorsement deals for my artists. People like Maya Karin itself, there will be people coming to say, hey, would I be able to actually get Maya for as an ambassador, for example. So I go through that, I go through the contracts, I go through agreements, and of course I also personally I would say I spend a lot of time talking to my staff because I believe that, part and parcel of the engine of the company will always be the staff. It is not just me because I can't say, it's just like a football team, right? Yeah. I always look at a typical day for me would be, yes, I need to spend some time, with my staff. And that also entails the fact that if I'm actually in the office, I will make an effort to walk around the office. So that, I don't know whether it's a typified, day in my life, but it does say a little bit.
Now, having, to conceptualize the teamwork you get from a football team, and you're strict, disciplined, so what kind of a boss are you?
Okay, I would say I'm very approachable, right? Of course, it's always nice to say good things about myself. There's always obviously the darker side of me as far as running a business. But I guess in all like all bosses, right? There's always going to be 2 parts of it. Where you've got to be able to be a good listener, and I think listening is actually a very important skill that I think a lot of bosses don't I would say do not possess because it's always I'm the boss, I'm always right. But my philosophy is that I'm not always right. Challenge me when you feel that I'm wrong, right? And I think this is where, first off, it's not just about for my personal enhancement or empowerment, it's really empowering my staff. Because if I were to shut them off all the time, guess what? There will be no ideas coming out of them, right? Whereas if I were to say, hey, you know what? Give me your ideas. If I accept it, I'll say yes. But if I don't accept it, I'll tell you why. Right? And I think the way I run my organization is actually relatively collective. And what I do is that it's very engaging, and I like to actually involve a lot of people. There are times whereby, again, just a simple thing like doing an email. I could just send an email to the head of department and say, get this done, right? But I don't, right? I'll say, get this done to so and so, but I copy the whole team so that at least the team knows what's actually happening.
They're
right?
in the loop.
So yes, they are in the loop, and I think that's something that's actually very important. It's also very, very much to me. It's really cascading of the information itself. To me, it's not about how much I know, it's about how much I can actually let you know. And I think that is extremely powerful in terms of having the team aligned with you. Because in any organization, mine is a relatively small organization of 30 over people.
2 countries.
Plus another 11 in Singapore, right? Okay. So but it's still very small, in comparison to all the MNCs out there and some huge companies there. But to me, even despite the fact that it's only 30 over people, the information flow has to be seamless. Literally, I don't want things to fall through the cracks by saying, hey, you know what, you guys should know exactly what's happening in the company. Sometimes it's about setting strategies. Sometimes it's about the goals and visions of the company. Those have to be shared.
Yep. Looking through your career path, music industry, fast cars, renowned sports brand, it all boils down to changing from one comfort zone to another. What's your take on change? Because you're very you're such a get-goer. So what's your take on change? Coming out of the comfort zone can be a really nerve-wracking moment for some people.
I would say that of course I'm one of those things I always say, right? Change is the only constant. Really, right? So if you think about it, right? I mean, again, if I were to look back 15 years ago when I started in the music business, a bit longer than that, I mean, the music business was run a different way. Now that I'm back, to Warner for the last 2 years, I realized that the business has evolved, right? That itself says that it has changed. Now, the thing about change is that how adaptable are you to the change?
Yeah.
How fast do you change, right? Of course, there's also another philosophy that I like to use a lot of analogies. One is that if you can't change, I'll change you, right? That sort of thing. Unfortunately, it sounds really brutal. But that's how it is, because we have to keep up with the times. Let's say, for example, we look at a very typical thing that we do with artists right now, right?
Yeah.
Social media.
Yeah.
Those days, 5 years ago, Twitter does not exist.
No.
YouTube does not exist. Well, maybe they did, but the thing is that Instagram didn't exist.
It wasn't as hit as it is now. It's not an essential part.
Yes, it is.
Now.
It has become an essential part of marketing and promotions. And this is where, hey, you know what? I may be whatever my age is. I have to start tweeting, or I have to be, have an Instagram, And so that is actually, to me, a little bit about change, right? So that itself, to me, I would say, I'm a big supporter of change. But I guess, unfortunately, a lot of people in the industry do not change, because they think that whatever they touch can turn to gold. Those days, so those days, 10 years ago, I did this, but I would say yes to a certain extent, because sometimes the formula works, but if it's tried and tested, it works. If it's not, guess what? Time to change, right? So yeah.
Time to change. We are going for a short break. Once we come back, we're going to be talking about the idiosyncrasies of the music industry here in Malaysia. Stay with us on Inside. Welcome back to Inside. We're talking to Darren Choy, who's the Managing Director of Warner Music Malaysia and Singapore. Now, a lot of people would like to know, you have a say in either making someone's dream or squashing someone's dream,
right.
being in the music industry. How does that sit with you?
Well, I would definitely say that I'm a dream maker. I mean, rather than squashing somebody's dream. I guess sometimes the reality is that, yes, unfortunately, not everyone that that picks up a mic can sing, right? I mean, that's the reality of it all, right? And I think it's sometimes also better to tell the person really, go into dancing, right, rather than singing. But of course, coming back to creating dreams and making dreamers superstars and stuff. Yeah, of course. And I think I do take pride in the fact that I've been very involved with the creation of a lot of stars, a lot of superstars. From those days where to a certain extent Ella was also with EMI. Those days when I was in EMI. Then we've got the Too Fat, we've got the Innuendos, and Aliyah and Shilamza and stuff. I think I guess there are lots of feathers on my cap. Which I take pride in the fact that these were some of the achievements, and I'm very happy that I'm able to actually do that. Yeah.
When you look back at joining the dots, what goes through your mind?
Well, I guess sometimes it's really about the fact that it's really important for us to actually look at let's say an artist, for example, or a star, for example, to be how should I say, to be encompassing in terms of what the artist is all about. Because, like, for example, an artist will say, I want to be an artist. Yeah, but the thing is that, does it really take to be an artist? What does it take to be an artist? I think it's really about, if you're talking about joining the dots, this is where it is. It's about discipline, it's about dedication, it's about commitment, it's about a lot of other things. And I think that basically I would say very broad stroke says it all for an artist. But sometimes the ruthless part of the music business is that out of 10 artists that comes out, probably 2 will succeed. And the hit rate is extremely low. But nevertheless, there's still a lot of people who still wants to go back into, who wants to come to the industry and still wants to be a star. Thanks also partly to all these reality TV programs and stuff, where there are a lot of artists that are actually being discovered through mediums like this, through platforms like this, right? Where there's the YouTube stars, where there's a reality TV program and stuff like that. Yeah.
People will always associate being in the music industry with the glam and the money, but realistically speaking, with CD sales, a lot of people have been questioning about the quantity of CD sales, and how
Right.
exactly do these people make money? Is it enough to just sell ringtones to telco providers?
Well, I guess if you look at the business right now, I mean, the thing is that the business actually comes in again various revenue streams, right? Yes, let's just say during 1996, 95, 96, that was the period where literally you can put a monkey in front of a mic and record, and then you can sell CDs, right? Literally those days. But unfortunately, those days are gone, right? So the reality now is that if you sell 2,000-3,000 CDs, that's considered quite good. Now, but the good thing about that is that I guess this is where we talked about the fact that the music industry has changed. It has changed, it has evolved, because right now it's actually very much more digital. Because like the digital business now contributes, I would say, 65% of the split between physical and digital. Now, digital is probably the lifeline to the music industry. Now, digital, what does digital encompass, right? It could be ringback tone, it could be the iTunes, it could be downloads, it could be the YouTube views and stuff like that. So, as we move along, there will eventually also be the streaming business. And the streaming business whereby you literally don't own a song, but guess what? You just rent it, right? So it's like, all you do is that you create a library of songs and say, okay, I'm going to play everything from the 80s, you just pick your own playlist, and all you have to do is pay a subscription, and that you get those songs, right? So all those things are starting to change the music business and how people consume music. And I think that's a great thing about that. Now, besides digital and physical, there's also other aspects in terms of how the artist can actually generate revenue. One would be through endorsements, to sponsorships, and of course, as ambassadors and stuff like that. And plus also in terms of concerts, right? There's also concert showcases, dinner shows and stuff like that. So there are those aspects of it whereby, I would say it's not really the end of the world, because a lot of people think, the music industry is probably a sunset industry, right? Well, so not necessarily. Thank God, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. It's not a train coming towards me, right? So there is actually still light. And I think, as I said, the consumption patterns of consumers have changed. So therefore, as an industry, as a label, we should change to, towards that, really. So.
And speaking of change and excitement, from music, you ventured into sports.
Yes.
Tell us, how did that come about?
I guess the funny thing is that I would say sports has always been my number one like, or my love. Then comes music, right? And but ironically, I went to the music business first. Now, it was really odd because what had happened was, way back in 2004, end of 2004, I was headhunted by Adidas, if I may mention Adidas. And the thing is that somebody called me up and said, hey, guess what? The MD of of Adidas Malaysia is going to actually move to India, and therefore we are looking for a successor for him. And of course, for me, it's like, I'm not even going to think twice. Right? It's like, there's nothing to consider. I raised my hand and said, yes, let's have a chat and stuff like that. And of course, I went through a very rigorous interview process, because I guess Adidas is a German brand, and I love the Germans, and because they're German. Guess what? They're extremely meticulous, very meticulous, very procedure driven, very process driven and stuff like. It's just like German engineering, right? So exactly. Look at the cars and how many brands of cars comes from Germany. So for me, it was a very interesting experience whereby. So obviously I went through a very rigorous interview process. I had 3 or 4 interviews. I was flown to Hong Kong to do the interview and stuff like that. But thank God, I guess maybe based on my experience, or based on my resume, or based on whatever I've done, I was able to to get the gig, and eventually I actually ran Adidas Malaysia for about 4 years, and then after I took on, funny enough, I took on Adidas Malaysia and Singapore role again, right? So I seem to have this affinity to the double country thing. It's like probably I'm just cheap labor, right? So it's like, why you can do Singapore too. So it was interesting, because I guess sports at that time was a very different it was a very different thing altogether, because the turnover of Adidas at that time when I took over was about 50 over 60 million a year, and I guess I was extremely happy by the fact that by the time I left, it actually was double. It was about 120 million in terms of turnover. Which was wonderful in a sense that I think the brand affinity was very strong, and I think in a way I would say that I was also part of the whole evolution of making Adidas a bit more relevant, because at that time I remember when I joined Adidas, people were looking at Adidas and saying, oh, you know what, it's a brand that my father would wear, right? Which I thought was right, because if you think about the 70s, guess what? All football boots or sportswear are in 3 stripes because Nike never really existed at the time. So I think that was one of those perceptions that that everybody is talking about. Oh, you know what? When I go to an Adidas store, I see black and white shoes, right? Where's the pink? Where's the yellow? Where's the and the 3 stripe? The 3 stripes is distinctive because that's basically the brand with 3 stripes. But that will never change, right? But the only thing is that what could have changed was basically the lifestyle element to it, in terms of the brand aspects of it. So how do we actually make Adidas cooler and sexier, if I were to use that word. And I think that was basically one of our main tasks. And I would say that I was instrumental. I wouldn't say I was solely involved, but as I say, I'll probably be a bit more humble in that aspect. So say I was instrumental in changing Adidas to be where it is in terms of the brand itself. So it was exciting.
Now, a lot of men would go, maybe a lot of women will go and say, oh, man, he has all the great jobs, music industry, the F1 and the sports brand. But what's the challenges that people don't see, behind all the glitz and glam?
Yeah. Well, I guess in all jobs, right? I mean, the thing is that if you really look at it, we are the people in the backstage. We are the people who prepare the runners to be ready for a competition itself. We are the people who's actually dressing up the artists, getting the artists ready and stuff. So I would always say that we are always the people in the backstage. I mean, because I don't come to work in my suit and tie all the time as much as I would like to. But I guess this is I would say there's a lot of hard work. It's really a business, right? I mean, the thing is that we're also talking about dealing with human factors. We're not just talking about dealing with products because sometimes in the music business itself, in Warner, for example, what exactly is my product? I would say, it's a physical CD, but it's also a ringback tone. But guess what? It is actually the artists themselves who is actually very much the product itself. But I guess when it goes to Adidas is different because Adidas is literally the brand and the product itself. So the glitz and glamour, there is that because what you see is actually out in the media. But what you really don't see is a lot more stuff that it's just like a chef, right? Wow, this is it's a beautiful dish. But guess what? 4 hours before that, it's the preparation of ingredients and everything. So we are very much like the chefs. Again, I'm using another analogy of us being the chefs. We're in the kitchen, we prepare and we serve you. So what you see as the end product, that's what it is. Yeah.
Before we go for a short break, a lot of people want to ask, being in this music industry, who's your favorite singers or group or rock bands of all time?
That's actually a very tough one because I think I've been asked that question many times and I don't actually have one. Now what happens is that I guess for me I've always said, well, the Beatles have always inspired me, right? I mean, again, like maybe another a billion people out there, unfortunately, but there's nothing unique. But I guess for me, it is actually whatever music that excites me, as we move along, right? Now, being in the music business is that I have to listen to lots of music, right? Some music I like, some music I don't, right? I listen to heavy metal, thrash metal, I listen to hip hop, I listen to classical and everything else. But I guess when it comes to what I really like, of course, I'm very much into hip hop. I'm into R&B. I'm into soul, right? If you're talking about, let's say, urban artists. I love urban artists, whether it's the Babyface, whether it's really the Bruno Mars right now. I mean, those are things that I would say I do like that particular genre. No, not specifically an artist, but a particular
probably
genre.
Songs.
Yeah, probably the songs. Yeah.
What about the local ones? Our local stars.
Local stars. Well, I would say local stars. I've always been. I would say, of course, I can be totally biased. So I love all my my Warner artists, right? Which I would name. But any which way, but I wouldn't, right? But I guess for me, it's really about the fact that there are a lot of cutting edge artists that we have. A lot of artists who dares to dream, right? Artists who would say, oh, well, let's be experimental. People like Joe, people like Malay, for example. I mean, they were obviously from Too Fat, right? But they've also started. They've also evolved and made themselves relevant right now. People like Hafiz, for example, he's a great singer. People like Yuna, for example, people like Sheila Hamza, right? So all these artists still excites me and says, well, you know what? I say, sometimes I say, I just wish they were all on my label, but unfortunately I can't, right? Yeah, as much as I would like to, but there will be some associations that eventually, hopefully, I will have a chance to work with them and things like that.
Maybe not now.
Yeah, maybe not now, but
soon, who knows?
Yeah, those that I've mentioned, a lot of them do have actually some sort of connection with Warner, which again I'm very happy that they are able to still work with us. Yeah.
All right, good. When we come back, we're going to be talking about family challenges and, of course, what's life outside the director's chair. See you on Inside. Hi, you're still watching Insight with me, Zalia Khairin. Our guest this week, Mr. Darren Choy of Warner Music Malaysia and Singapore. Now, we've chat about the career path and music industry, the scenario here in Malaysia. Of course, there's more left to be discovered. But throughout the career path, about the success of a man, from the success stories, also from the challenging times. You've had your share of challenging times as well.
Oh, most definitely.
And even for those who are not in the music industry, keeping abreast of what's happening in the papers with the fiasco between you and Ryan Chung and Daphne Eiking, you as hard as it was, you went through it, so calmly. A lot of people want to know, how did you brave through it?
Thanks for saying that. I went through with it calmly, but I guess I guess there was a little blimp in my life, literally, right? I mean, it was a little speed bump, and I think it is actually a tough period of my life, because obviously it has affected the family, has affected I wouldn't say it has actually affected my career, because the funny thing is that when I spoke to my superiors then, they was like, it's okay. It was like, it was very comforting to know, right? And I guess when I spoke to my family, it's like, you know what, we're behind you. So I think with that itself, with the support, the support that's around me, that made a lot of difference. But of course, it was not something that I would say it was morally right. Neither would I condone doing that. But unfortunately, that little blimp was challenging for me to actually, I would say, manage and balance, as far as my career is concerned, as far as family is concerned, peers are concerned, and things like that. So, but I guess that's in the past, and I would say that I've learned, from it. It's I would say it's a lesson. Whether it's an expensive one or not, it's immaterial, right? But it was a lesson. Yeah.
Was there hesitance involved? Kickstarting from that incident, when other female talents came into it?
Oh, well, certainly not. I would say that I guess people who's known me would know exactly who I am. I guess sometimes it takes two hands to clap, and I guess I shall not dwell too much into this, because it's probably going to be another different episode altogether if we were to talk about that, right? It's probably a great script for a movie, but but the fact is that, as I said, it really to me it's it takes two hands to clap, but let it be what it is, really. So
do you think you could have escaped the limelight though?
I don't think so. Unfortunately, the people who were involved were, I guess for me being, in the corporate world, I guess, to some extent people know me, and, whoever that was involved, people know her, and, it is also basically, it's the media, right? I mean, I can't blame the fact that the media thinks that this is really juicy stuff, because these things, this thing came out of nowhere, and they say, hey, you know what, it is great page 3 material, right? Thank God it's not headline material, but, it's page 3 material, and I think, again, media being media, I guess I've got I've got lots and lots of friends in the media, but I've also got lots of I can also understand what the media lives on, right? And I don't blame them, right? So, but the great thing is that there was actually, I would say fairness in terms of its reporting, and then obviously there was actually lots of supporters for me. There were also lots of supporters for the other party, but again, it is also something that I look back and say, oh, okay, that's interesting, that happened, but guess what? Move on, right?
A lot of Hollywood people would probably take a retreat or something just to get away from it and come back with a clean slate. What was it like for you?
Well, I guess the funny thing is that I didn't, unfortunately, I didn't have the chance to actually take a retreat, when it comes to that. But nevertheless, a funny thing was at that time I was also working in Formula One, and whether it was intentionally planned like that or not, or it's just purely coincidental, I don't know, right? But I would say it's probably at that time it was also a career move where I actually went into Formula One, with the Lotus team and things like that, which was great for me, to be able to travel the world. But I guess at that time, I guess obviously I actually had to come back, to attend court and stuff like that. So. Yeah, it was just really a whole balancing act.
It was just keep walking.
Yes,
keep walking.
Keep running, really.
Did your perception of marriage change after that chapter?
Well, I would say the perception of marriage to me, I think again, it is really very much up to the couples, right? I mean, the couples, if let's say if we can forgive and forget, we move, and then we hold hands and we hug and let's just move on. But if let's say if the couples decide to say, I guess this has scarred me. I would like to move on, to do something else. I think that's what it is. Right? So I think in terms of marriage, again, it's something that's really, I would say it's something that I would say it's really up to the person, right? I mean, whether or not the person is able to say, hey, you know what, as far as I'm concerned, till death do us part. But but we do see lots of casualties as far as marriage is concerned, right? For whatever reasons, may not necessarily, but whatever happened to me, but it could be other things. It could be, like, oh, you know what, you didn't actually put up the toilet seat, right? And that is going to be, a reason for me to say goodbye to you, right? Or you've got toothpaste all over the basin, right? Those sort of stuff, right? So there could be the minor stuff and petty stuff, but there could also be the bigger stuff, that can literally, change a marriage. It can either strengthen a marriage or literally you can walk off and take separate ways, right? So.
If we may ask, how did your partner handle it at that point of time?
Well, she was very supportive. I would say that she was very supportive. She was doing research, she was Googling stuff, and I think that was basically an amazing thing. It was an amazing thing that she was right behind me, right? So I think that was, and she kept a couple of files of all the stuff, because when I was at that time I was in the UK, and she kept files, and and it was an incredible effort that she put into it. So.
And still speaking on family, you have 2 countries that you're pretty much handling, and then with a lot of events coming up, press signing, press release, and all these other publicity things that you have to do. It comes with a job.
Yes,
so how do you balance out your time with your family? And I see you dedicate a lot of time in sports as well.
Yes, I do. And I would say that it's really, I guess, in a day you have 24 hours, right? Okay, I definitely need to get my 7-8 hours sleep, right? Unfortunately, I'm like that. So
is that possible?
It's my beauty sleep, right? No. Well, no, but it is actually possible, because I go to bed at 12. I will try to discipline myself, let's say go to bed at 12. But I guess, again, once after that, it's got to be, my morning regimes, and I go to work. And I would say that the balance probably comes in whereby, let's say in a week, right? Out of 5 days, 5 working days, I would say that 2 or 3 days I'll be out, for appointments, for press conferences, for events and stuff like that, right? But there'll be a couple of days where I would say, I'll make sure that I go back home, spend some time with the kids, have dinner with the kids, bring the boys out, and things like that. But on weekends, I would say it's very sacred for me. Sacred is in a sense that, I could literally say, well, it's going to be my reading weekend, right? And the boys will know that, I've got 3 boys, and they will know that, okay, it's daddy's reading time, so they won't disturb me. I'll be at my veranda, sipping my tea, and, and I'll be reading. And sometimes I would go out cycling, and sometimes I'll bring the boys to do their sports, And I think this is where the bonding happens, whereby my weekends are such that, it could be a movie marathon, right? I've done that before, and say, hey guys, you know what? I think this weekend we've got some brilliant movies. Let's do 3 movies, and literally we have done that, But in between movies, it's like, no, 10 minutes, get our popcorn, run into the next movie, next cinema, right? So those sort of stuff, right? So then, of course, if you were to look at a typical week itself, yes, I do actually have the chance to actually do that. But I guess I would say that, unfortunately, I do spend a lot more time at work, because I come to work at about maybe 10 o'clock, 10:30. But what I do is I actually sometimes go back at 8, 9 o'clock. So I may not have that much time on the weekdays with the boys, but the great thing is that I do spend the weekends with them. Yeah.
A lot of things are yet to be discovered with Mr. Darren Choy. Stay with us on Inside. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Thanks for staying with us on Inside. We're talking to Darren Choy of Warner Music Malaysia and Singapore. A lot of interesting, funny discoveries that we've found out before the start of the recording.
Right.
Now, I've a little funny. I find that you have about 420 miniature cars.
Yes, I do. I am a collector of these little die-cast cars, right? Well, I guess in the model world, you understand that a 118 is about this size, about 6 inches long, and a 143 is about 3.5 inches long, sort of die-cast model. So I collect Formula 1 cars.
420 cars.
Yes,
and I'm pretty sure the number is going to be growing soon.
Yes, unfortunately, it has been. So I haven't.
What's the latest statistic now?
Well, I actually have about 220, 230 of each, so there's about 450, 460. I can actually show you my collection at some point in time. But for whatever reasons, I've started collecting Formula 1 cars. die-cast cars, unfortunately. Yeah, for I would say maybe 12, 15 years.
I wouldn't say it's
Yeah.
unfortunate. I mean, boys grow up, but the toys just get more expensive.
Yeah, it does. You know, and I think I got to start insuring some of these cars because you know it's quite a massive collection. I would say, yeah.
How did you get all these cars anyway?
Well, I would say that you know my very first one I got it when I guess when I would say that when the Formula One came to Malaysia, right? So I would say that was I was following a little bit of Formula One, but somehow it was on TV, right? But I guess when Formula One became really as commercialized as what it is today, that's when I was sucked into it, right? To say, hey, you know what, my passion in Formula One, watching the races and stuff like that, and going to the races was very much part and parcel of me, right? And I guess everybody's got a little hobbies here and there. And from there, I thought, okay, you know what? It's nice to actually start collecting these little cars, right? Like any other hobby. So that's when I started. My first car that I bought was actually a Sauber. A Sauber. And from then, it was literally all the cars that I wanted. I actually collected. So yeah.
All this somehow reflects planning and building, organizing. What makes a good leader?
Yeah.
Now, here's a question: if you're the Prime Minister of Malaysia. What are the changes you'll make in the country?
Okay, that's a good one. Okay, that's a good one. I mean, there are lots of, I guess, I would say lots of changes. I guess, ultimately, yeah, I think it's really about unifying the nation itself. I think the One Malaysia concept works. But I guess, it's really interesting because when we talk about the fact that when we go out, to let's say meetings and stuff like that, when we talk about, I'm a Malaysian, and I don't say I'm a Chinese. I don't say that, he's a Malay. Yeah. But we go as Malaysians. I think, that aspect itself is something that how else can we instill the Malaysianness in all of us? That's so I think that unity could be food, it could be culture, it could be a lot of things. And I think we should not actually look at ourselves as as a particular race, but look at ourselves as a united race, literally called Malaysians, right? But of course, if you look at changes, there are tons. I mean, if you look at public transport, we should change that. We look at we look at let's say public safety, we should change that. Look at education, we should change that. I mean, if you ask me, I can be very critical as far as that is concerned. But of course, if I'm going to be part of the think tank of the government, I would love to actually give my 2 cents worth because I think sports, for example. Guess what? We want to actually create the next, let's say Olympian. How can we do that when we don't have the bare basics of starting them when they're 5 years old, right? Because we are saying, hey, guess what? We just discovered our sprinter when he's 15 years old. It's too late, right? So, I mean, I think there are a lot of things that we should do, as a nation in terms of doing stuff at the very basic, the foundation. How were the Twin Towers built? A solid foundation before the 88 floors went up, right? So to me, in any aspects of how nation building should be, it's about the foundation. Are we sure? Do we have the right education system, right? Whether it's going to be English medium or Malay medium or whether it's vernacular, whatever it may be. Ultimately, it's actually that quality itself that we got to have. To me, it's just really go down to the basics, start them everything young. I mean, whether you call it indoctrination or brainwashing or literally nurturing. That's what it is, right? And I think that's where, unfortunately, a lot of times, as politicians, we looked at and say, hey, this is what we see. But have we actually looked back and say, before we get to where we are, what could we have done before that to get to where we are, right? And I think if you're talking about changes, there are tons and tons of things to change. But I guess the PM has actually done a great job so far, and I guess there's a lot more to be done. Really,
working process.
Yes.
Now, if we were to take it down a few notches, if you're given the choice to head any ministry, which would you choose?
That's an interesting one. Stumped. Okay, but anyway. Ministry of Sports, obviously. Yeah, I would love to do Ministry of Sports because on the other hand, I would say Kyrie is actually probably is definitely the right person because he's young, he's dynamic and he knows exactly what's required. And I guess also because why I say I want to do Ministry of Youth and Sports because I think they are the future of the nation. The youth and of course sports can obviously bring a lot of unity to the country. By winning the Suzuki Cup, we got a holiday, so that's unity for you, right? So yeah.
What do you think? You've given some thoughts of what our YBKJ is like.
Right.
What are the things that you think he should focus on?
No, I think well, in terms of sports, I would say there are lots of sports that I would say that Malaysians themselves, okay, like for example, physically, we're not the biggest of people in this world, right? So we don't go to a sports where it's physical. I mean, we can't go into rugby, right? We will never ever win rugby. But go into sports whereby, like for example, bowling, for example, squash, right? These are sports where you don't necessarily need to have the physique to be able to challenge whoever's out there, right? But I guess in this case, there could be sports like equestrian, for example, right? Like yourself, you go into where we could excel, right? In terms of saying, hey, you know what? There are some sports that we can actually focus on, whereby we can be medal winners, we can be world beaters and stuff like that. Right? So yeah.
What are the things? If you can just drop work today,
Right.
if you can just drop work and go anywhere you would want to, what would be your destination?
In fact, funny enough, my son just went to the Everest. He climbed when he's only 18. He's probably one of the youngest climbers to Everest, but he actually went to this island peak, which was about 6,184 meters high, right? And I would probably like to do that. I would like to emulate what my son did. So in a way, he's actually done it before I did. And I guess he's, he's very adventurous. And that would be something that I would like to do. I would love to go to the North or South Pole. Right? Things that I guess not many people have said, oh, I could do that, right? So of course I would love to travel the world. There are a lot of things I want to do, right? I would love to travel the world. There are places, there are 500 places. There was this book that says 500 places you should go to before you die, right?
How many have you crossed out so far?
Probably not even 100, but enough for me to say, yeah, I've been here. I put some dots on the world map and say I've been here and there, right? So which I think is great, and I think that's part and parcel of life, whereby you get the chance to actually travel the world, you get the chance to do your stuff that you like, and you enjoy and everything else, right? So yeah.
How are you like at home?
As a father, I would say I'm very nurturing because I guess when I'm here, when I sit down with my staff, I talk to them about like my kids, like my children and stuff like that, right? I always like to guide them, I like to teach them, and I guess it also goes back to again, when I was in school day, right? When I'm in sports, so this is what I guess. Psychologically, subconsciously, we all grew up that way, right? I was into team sports, I was into individual sports, and that discipline kind of like gets cascaded into exactly, and then right now it's like, okay, when it comes to work, that's what it is. And at home, many times my children will come to me and say, Dad, what does this mean? Of course I could say, you Google it, right? Or Yahoo it, right? Or Bing it, right? But I wouldn't. But I would try to explain to them, based on my best knowledge. But sometimes if I wasn't sure, please, go ahead and check on reference books, or not so much of reference books now because everything's online, right? So you can say, well, let's just Google it and stuff like that. So at home I'm very much like that, and as it. I will also have my private time where sometimes I watch my football, and on the weekends and stuff like that, and the boys will know, and sometimes the boys will watch with me. And funny thing is that my kids, my boys are, all of us have got different teams that we support. We've got different Formula One teams that we support, and that is actually wonderful, right? Because I support McLaren, my son support Ferrari, and I think it was Sauber, and then football team, that's I'm a Liverpool fan. My sons are Arsenal and Chelsea fans, so it makes great rivalry at home because it's like we'll be wearing different jerseys and we'll be watching football and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's where the excitement's coming from.
Yeah, exactly. So
So from F1 and state volleyball player, ardent football fan, there are two sports that you are not quite fond of.
Yes.
And what are those?
Okay, I guess a lot of people are very surprised that I don't swim. The reason why I don't swim is because, again, it goes back to when I was growing up, right? Because I've got a bout of asthma when I was younger, right? And I guess those days, when you're growing up in a old family, a family where it's a bit more traditional, right? And my grandmother or my mom would say, oh, you know what? Don't get into water because when you go into water, you might catch a cold and you get a fever, and then your asthma will there's going to be asthma attack and stuff. So from that day onwards, but of course, right now, the medical field tells you go into the pool because it helps, and things like that. So then, of course, I never learned how to swim, and okay, if you were to throw me in the pool, I could swim, but unfortunately, I can't trap water, right? I can swim from one end to the other, and that's it, right? So without stopping, but unfortunately, I don't run on Energizer batteries. I can't swim forever and not.
You don't have gills.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't swim. That's one.
Not yet.
Not yet. Yeah.
What's the other sports?
Well, I don't golf, and I think a lot of people say, oh, you know what, you are in this position. Guess what? You need to really network.
People say that all the time.
And I know deals get done in the golf courses, right? But there are also deals that's done outside of golf courses, right? There are people who would say, but golf to me. It's a wonderful game. When I was in Adidas, I enjoy watching golf because TaylorMade was one of the brands within Adidas itself. And watching sports, to me, I watch literally every sport. I don't do rugby, but guess what? I love watching rugby because it's very strategic. American football, for example, right? To me, it's probably one of the most complex sports that one person can actually create. And I enjoy all the sports, right? And yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I don't golf. I don't swim. Yeah.
What's next on the checklist? What sits at the top of the priority list short term?
Okay. Short term, I guess, when it comes to work, there's still a lot for me to do. I came back to the music industry about 2 years ago, which is actually, after a hiatus of, I would say, maybe, 8 years, which is a long time. And I think with that departure from the music industry itself, it gave me a different perspective of life, of career, and things like that. And I would say that coming back to the music industry, a lot of people ask me, why do you come back to the music industry? Isn't it a sunset industry? I say no. I think when I left in 2004, I said, hey, you know what? The music consumption, it's just that music will never ever die because music's everywhere, right? But it's just how people consume it and how do we deliver music to them. And this is where we talked about the fact that it's gone digital, people are consuming it through streaming and everything else, right?
Yep.
So for me, I would say my career aspects of it, there's still a lot for me to do in terms of re-establishing Warner to be a force to be reckoned with, whether it's international repertoire, whether it's Chinese repertoire, whether it's, of course, domestic repertoire. Because for me, as I said, I've always been a supporter of domestic talent. Why? Because domestic talents, in this case, would be our local artists. They are basically the ambassadors of the country. Look at what has happened to K-pop. Right? The K-pop phenomena has exported the Korean culture all throughout the world. Now, can we do it with Malaysian artists?
Of course
Answers,
we can.
of course we can. Yes, exactly, right? The Yunas, the Sheila Hamzas, two of the best examples of artists who could literally basically transcend boundaries, because music, I would say, can transcend boundaries, and I would say that part of my short-term goal would be for me to be able to play that part in bringing an artist to a different level, if the artist is not already there, right? So
onwards and upwards. Before we let you go, we have a quick word swap that we always have on the show at the end of the show. Volleyball.
Oh, me.
Nasi lemak.
Nasi lemak. Oh, Malaysian.
Love.
Passion.
Enemy.
None.
Family.
Love.
Goal.
Goal is a good one. Okay, not a moving goalpost.
Ambition.
Ambition. Well, the sky's the limit.
Malaysia.
Tanah tumpah ni darahku.
Wow, that's a good one. And lastly, family.
Yeah, well, the love of my life.
Darren, Choy, thank you so much for joining us.
Welcome.
It's been a pleasure. That was
much.
such a good chat. We wish you all the best in your future
Thank you very
undertakings.
much.
Looking
Yes.
for more stars from Warner Music Malaysia
I hope
and
so.
Singapore.
Yes, I hope so.
And I guess we'll see you soon.
Yes, definitely.
All right, and
Thank you
that's
very
all.
much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that's all we have on Insight this week. We'll be talking to more outstanding individuals. Just stay with us. And until we meet again, salam satu Malaysia.